Welcome to the third episode of the Foxgrove podcast, the podcast that I do when there's a little bit of everything that I want to talk about, but not enough to make an entire video on. A lot of different things going on. Nothing is like yesterday's news, but still things that are worth talking about, I feel. We have the new Pokémon trading card game Pocket that has come out a little over 2 weeks now, I believe, and I've started playing it just yesterday. Pretty fun. We have a little bit of news around the Yu-Gi-Oh sphere, some new product coming out that's always worth mentioning. We have some not so interesting stuff like the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, which I'm just going to talk about it just because it happened. Not really interested in the subject, but hey, it did happen, worth mentioning. We had the US government confirming that there are aliens in the water. If you hadn't heard about this, the US government has confirmed that there are UFOs, or I guess they're called USOs, I don't know, UFOs that come out of the water. That's a thing now, and nobody cares. The reality is, though, that pretty much the only thing that anybody's been talking about and has completely hijacked my TikTok and all my social media is World War III. That's all anybody's talking about right now. I'm kind of over it, but it's a thing. President Biden has authorized Ukraine to use American-made missiles against Russia, and they just so happen to have done exactly that. So they fired a few missiles at Russia. They were mostly intercepted. I think some sort of ammo depot blew up, but that was about it. And now Russia has made some changes on their policies regarding the use of nuclear weapons, so that's always fun, right? It's always fun when some crazy dictatorship or some other country that absolutely hates us is just talking about using nukes. That's always great. But hey, some positive news in all this, something to think about, is that if a nuclear war does in fact happen, we're all going to be dead, so it won't really matter, so why even worry about it, right? The worst that could happen is that suddenly your rent is not due at the end of the month, because you're dead, so I'm choosing not to even focus on this. I mean, I have been looking into it, but I'm kind of over it. I'm tired of the conversation, honestly. But those are just a few of the lovely things going on around the world right now. I guess worth mentioning also, Mr. Johnny Somali, we'll just briefly talk about this idiot, is looking at some prison time in South Korea. I'll take a quick look and see what's the update on that, but I do really hope he goes to prison. I think he deserves it. But those are a few things that we got going on here in the world. Let's just get started. A lot to talk about. So let's start with Pokemon trading card game Pocket, which again, I think that the game has been out for a little bit now, just a little over 2 weeks, but to me it was new. I picked it up for the first time yesterday, and I gotta say, I've been having a blast. It's great. I don't know how I would rate it in comparison to the actual Pokemon TCG, right? It's kind of like the equivalent, maybe I guess, of Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duels, right? The way it works is a little bit, a simplified, shorter, quicker version of the Pokemon TCG, but it's really fun. It works out great. The Pokemon Company just never ceases to amaze me with their ability to capitalize on their IP in general and put out good product. Not everything that they put out is great, that's fine, but generally speaking, I mean, I think they do a pretty good job. The last mobile game that they put out was a huge hit, Pokemon Go, everybody loved that. This is no different. But nevertheless, it's always interesting to observe that anything that comes out that's Pokemon related just seems to sell really fucking well, no matter what it is, and this is no exception. The Pokemon trading card game Pocket is estimated to have made over $120 million in revenue since its launch. I think I was reading like $14 million a day, something crazy like that, and it's been out just over 2 weeks, which is insane. Which honestly, I can see why. It's a pretty darn good product. There's an aspect of FOMO, right? And people just liking collecting the cards in general. So even if it's digital, they also want to collect it. There's that. There's really no other card game that has been able to capture that collectability zeitgeist that Pokemon has retained for the last, 2 decades? It's pretty impressive. But the game itself as a software, it's pretty darn good. And, I've always been a fan of the Pokemon TCG itself. I grew up playing Pokemon, Magic, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Those were the 3 big ones that I always played. And out of those 3, Pokemon was never really my favorite, as far as the game itself, but I did always enjoy collecting it, and I did enjoy the TCG. As I grew up and got a little bit older, I did get more into the TCG. I find it very fun. I don't really collect the physical game. I sold all my Pokemon cards. In general, I just don't like collecting things other than, I guess, guns, which that sounds really bad, but that's the only thing that I like collecting, really. As far as toys and cards and things like that, I love card games, but it's been a while that I've given up playing card games in person for different reasons I've covered in this channel in general. The only card game that I still bother playing in person really is Flesh and Blood, but I do play a lot of Pokemon TCG. That's something that I don't think I've ever mentioned on this channel, that I actually play that game a lot. I mostly play it on the Pokemon Live service, which most people hate that thing, and I actually have always really liked it. A lot of people have been complaining since the new one came out that it has an unfair monetization, that you can't even really buy the cards, there's nothing for free-to-play players, which I get it, that's all valid, but it's not that expensive either. It's not like you're buying the actual cards, right? So it's not nearly as expensive. And if you don't know this, the online Pokemon TCG, you can get the cards for the game by buying actual packs of Pokemon cards, right? So anytime you buy a pack of cards from Pokemon, one of the little things in there is like this little voucher that you use to redeem it to be able to play Pokemon Live. So there's a pack that gets opened in the game also. Most people, what they do with those is they either give them away or they sell it very cheap or they just toss it out, right? Most people don't care for those. I'm that one guy that hunts around for those because I really like playing the actual TCG. I don't like collecting Pokemon, like I said, but I do enjoy playing the game. So I mostly play it on Pokemon Live using those. And what I found is that it's actually one of the cheapest TCGs to play. If your intention is not to collect or physically play the game, you just want to play the game online, it's pretty darn cheap. There are multiple online stores and websites that sell these, and I'm not going to recommend any one of them in particular. Just look them up in general. There's quite a few of them, but you can buy these little digital equivalent of packs for like 5 or 10 cents on the dollar, man. It's not expensive. If anything, I've spent a lot more on Master Duel or Magic Arena or Dragon Ball Super Online. I spent a lot more than on the Pokemon one. That's the cheapest one, frankly. Now, I get it, it's not as generous and it's not as good of a product as, say, Master Duel is, but I think that as a software, as a product, Master Duel is kind of peak, honestly. For all the negative things that I have to say about modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, which most of you who are on this channel are very familiar with my opinions on that, for everything that I have to say, Master Duel is pretty darn good as a product. It's very generous. And believe it or not, I do play that game a lot. I've been having a ton of fun with Master Duel right now because the meta is basically Tenpai and I'm playing Buster Blader, so I've been having a good time. But back to Pokemon TCG Pocket. Like I had mentioned, the game plays exactly like the actual Pokemon TCG plays, but it's a quicker, more simplified version of it. And it's not simplified, it's just faster. The rules are basically the same. The card pool is a bit smaller for now, right? They're still coming out with stuff, but there are limits on, how many cards you can have and all that are different. You can only have 20 cards in your deck, and instead of 6 prizes to win the game, you just need 3. So it's basically the same game, but rounds are quicker, and I did enjoy that. Although I definitely do prefer the actual Pokemon TCG, one thing that I have with that game is that sometimes the matches, they can drag on for a while. Sometimes games are a little bit too long, which it's fine. I like the game still, but that is a thing. With this game, the Pokemon TCG Pocket, the games are pretty much done in I guess 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't take very long for the games to be done, so you can get a lot of games in a short period of time. The Pokemon TCG in general lacks a little bit of depth, right? That's to its detriment and to its advantage, but I still really enjoy it. I've always enjoyed the Pokemon TCG, and this game is really no different. It's one of those games where I probably wouldn't sit in front of my computer like I do with the actual Pokemon TCG and play all afternoon, right? But before bed, when you're in the bathroom, when you're, I don't know, at the car shop, whatever, it's pretty nice. I posted this on the community tab. I was able to pull out, I think my 3rd pack that was free, by the way. I haven't put a dime into this game, and I pulled out the Mewtwo Gold EX already and the regular EX version of him. I've pretty much been able to make the deck that I wanted, which is a Psychic Mewtwo deck already, and I haven't put a dime into the game. Again, I didn't spend a single penny, so it is fairly generous. There are 3 card packs that you can choose to open from, and you can open one of them for free every 12 hours. So there's that, and if you want to subscribe to their, premium service or whatever it is, it's $9.99 a month, I believe. You get an additional free pull every 24 hours, and some additional chotskis. You get access to the member shop or something like that, which I did because you can sign up for a free trial for 2 weeks. So I did do that because it says right there, and don't quote me on it, you should read the terms of service for yourself. Maybe I'll end up paying the $10, but I don't think I will. It says right there when you look at the service that you can subscribe for $9.99 a month, but you do get a 2-week free trial. So if you don't want it after the 2 weeks, you can just cancel it. So my understanding is you can pretty much take advantage of the extra pulls for 2 weeks, and then if you don't want to pay for it, you just cancel it at that point. So that's what I'm doing. If I end up eating $10, it's not the end of the world, but I don't think I will because I read it. I thought that their business model was pretty generous, honestly. I was expecting it to be a lot greedier than it really is. I mean, again, I haven't put a dime into the game, and I pretty much made the deck that I want. I've been playing against people online, no problem. I've played a total of, I guess, 20 to 30 games right now online, and I haven't played against anyone where I felt okay, this person won because they're pay to win or whatever. I haven't felt that at all. I've actually won most of my games. But the game looks gorgeous as a software. It works very well. The artwork on the cards are beautiful. A lot of them are those retro cards that we grew up playing with that are very nostalgic and classic for us. Which again, it never ceases to amaze me how Pokemon manages to retain the essence of their IP, which is something other fucking card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Should learn from, where, you don't have to get rid of everything that's old to be able to make new stuff. I love how Pokemon manages to strike this awesome balance between some cool new stuff that comes out, which not all of it is cool, some of it inevitably won't be as cool, but while also retaining a lot of the classics. So you're playing with different decks, and even if you haven't been, following up with the Pokemon TCG or the anime, you will find stuff that you recognize and stuff that you don't. So it's a super nice blend of old and new. The animations on the card are very cool too. Like one of the Mewtwo EXs that I got that wasn't the gold one, they do this thing where as soon as you get it, you can click on the animation of the card and it goes into the card. It's hard to explain. I'll try to see if I can show it to you here. I might not be able to because I don't know how to record on my phone. But it's this card where you have basically Mewtwo escaping from a window, right? He's escaping from the lab, right? From his creators. And the animation when you get the card goes into the card and it does like a cinematic, almost like as if he had actually escaped from the pod that created him type of thing. Or whatever it is, that chamber that was his life support or containment. I don't remember what it is, but it goes into that and it does an animation that builds up to the picture you see. So it looks very cool. I think that the entire game looks gorgeous. I'm having a lot of fun with it. As far as mileage, that's, it's debatable. I don't know how much mileage I'll get from it, and everybody will, honestly, but it's fun. For a game that I haven't spent a single dime on, it's pretty darn fun. It normally doesn't go down that way, especially with Pokemon. I am surprised again how generous they've been with the business model. On the Yu-Gi-Oh side of things, a little bit of news that I saw. Number one, the most important thing that we'll go over here is the last Speed Duel product, in theory, that is coming out, which is available in, I believe, North America and Latin America, but it's not going to be available in Europe. For some reason, Konami hates Europe, and I think that North America is next on the list, honestly. I think that the game eventually is going to be Japan only, but let's not get into that. This is, in theory, the last Speed Duel product that is going to be coming out, and it's very like a classic Egyptian god themed, so I don't know how much these are actually going to be viable to play. But it's there, so if you want to be a part of the last Speed Duel product, in theory, that they will ever make, because I feel like they've said that before. I feel like I've heard this before, but I could be wrong. But anyway, if you want to be a part of that, they will be, I think in December is when they're going to be coming out, just in time for Christmas. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I am not a Speed Duel guy, and I'm not a fan of Speed Duels whatsoever. Like, I much more prefer the actual TCG or Rush Duels. As a soft reboot or as an alternative product, I think that Rush Duels is just fine. I like the game just fine. I play it every now and again. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I think it's okay. I think it's more Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think that there should be more ways of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In general. So you're never going to hear me dogging on Rush Duels, alright? I mean, I've given my opinions on it, how I don't think that it's a true, real reboot, that I think that there's reasons why it hasn't been as successful as it could. I've talked about all of that. But as far as my opinion on what we have right now for Rush Duels, I like it. It's grown a lot on me. When it first came out, I wasn't the biggest fan. I got tired of it really quick, but as they released new stuff on Duel Links, I got the idea. It really did grow on me over time, and, I play it fairly regularly now. I wouldn't say that I play it more than the actual TCG, but I do play it fairly often. It's fine. The other tidbit of news that I had read was regarding two new structure decks that came out for Yu-Gi-Oh! One is like a Neos hero themed deck, and the other one is a Sword Soul deck, which is a interesting like versus matchup, I guess. It seems weird to me. I don't know. How do you even do that with Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I love the way how Pokemon does it, because me and my wife will pick up those structure decks that are made to be played against each other, and we'll do that all the time, and it's great. Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really have that anymore. Back in the day, Yu-Gi-Oh did have some pretty cool structure decks. Like I remember there was like the zombie structure deck or the water structure deck, and it was almost like they could play against each other type of thing. It's not as clean cut as like fire versus water, right? Or a light deck versus a dark deck type of thing, or zombies versus warriors. I don't know. It doesn't seem that clean to me. I feel like Pokemon does a way better job of this in general. It's, the metal deck against the flying deck or whatever, the ground deck versus the plant, or fire versus water, electric, whatever it is. I think that they do a way better job of that. As somebody who, again, doesn't really collect Pokemon, but, me and my wife like playing the game, right? But I'm not going to spend a ton of money to play just with her. So we do pick up those structure decks every now and again. I think we're up to like 8 of them at this point, because whenever we want to play something new, we'll see them. Like, they get normally sold together. So we both each pick up one and we just play against each other the way the decks were meant to be played, right? We don't add any extra cards or anything. We just, out the box, they're ready to play. I think it's great the way that they do that. Yu-Gi-Oh needs to do a better job of that in general, but how could they? Would anybody actually buy that? If you made a structure deck that was fire versus water at this point, would anybody really buy that? I don't know. I guess I just don't see it. There is this thing that we've talked about many times on this channel regarding Yu-Gi-Oh not getting new blood, and how most of their products just don't appeal to new players. They're not sold in such a way that it seems that you can just pick them up and play. Maybe that's something that Konami should look into. I think that they are. This probably is an attempt of them trying to do something like that. Just a deck that's ready out the box, ready to play against another deck, right? I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan. Yu-Gi-Oh in general, I don't even think at this point like it's their fault. I don't think there's much that they can do about it at this point, right? I think that Yu-Gi-Oh just kind of is what it is right now, and you either kind of really get into it and dedicate yourself to learn how the game works and put in the financial investment, or I don't know, kind of stay out of it. Which is horrible to say, because the most fun I ever have with Yu-Gi-Oh is either alternative formats or like kitchen table Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So I shouldn't be saying that, but that kind of is what it feels like. If you really want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh, even to play at locals, you can't really just buy a structure deck and show up at locals with that. I mean, you can, but you're not going to have a good time. You do, to an extent, have to make some sort of investment, right? Even if you want to make like a fun deck, there's still a little bit more of a financial investment than just getting a structured deck, honestly. And that's most games, so maybe that's not even fair to say. It's just that, again, we've talked about this extensively. I don't want to dwell on it, but Yu-Gi-Oh, you can't just pick up the game and learn it. It's not really like Pokemon, right? I think if you're a new Yu-Gi-Oh player, you're at one of 3 stages only, right? You're either trying to pick the game up and it was too crazy, you couldn't get into it and you just didn't learn the rules and gave up. Or you did pick up the game, but as you played more and more and you started facing, the meta decks, the Kashteras or the Snake Eyes, the Voiceless Voice, whatever it is, as you played it, it just wasn't for you type of thing. I personally know a couple friends that was exactly the case. They, liked everything about the new game. They got into it. As soon as they start playing like ranked on Master Duel or playing against, meta decks, it just wasn't for them, the way that the game flows, right? Or you're at the 3rd stage, which you picked up the game, you really like it, and you're really getting into it at that point, right? So I don't think you're going to go and pick up a structure deck at that point. You're just buying singles, I think, or you're like ranking on Master Duel. I don't think that the scenario that I described for me and my wife earlier of just like walking into GameStop or something, picking up 2 structure decks that are made to be played against each other and just playing that, I don't think that scenario exists for Yu-Gi-Oh, honestly. You're either like all in, grinding on the Master Duel ladder, or going to locals, going to YCSs, or you're just completely out of it. You don't get the game, you don't like it. I think it's like one extreme or the other, unfortunately. How do we fix that? What are the solutions? Well, hey, I have an entire playlist of videos for you just on that. Let's move on. I'll just talk about this really quick just because it happened. I mean, I am interested to an extent in boxing. I've been a boxer my entire life since I think I started boxing when I was 13 years old. So I do have an interest in the sport, right? But these celebrity boxing matches, I just think they're so stupid. The fact that seems to be like the face of the sport right now and what generates the most money and views, that's so sad to me, honestly. It's even more sad that they're putting a really young guy to fight against a really old guy. That to me was, I'm not going to say that it was disgusting. I'm not going to say that like it's a problem because he agreed to it, all right? I've been seeing all these people on TikTok like feeling really bad for Mike Tyson and crying that he took the fight and got hurt because he needed the money. Like, goddamn, the dude's a fucking millionaire. Yes, he did in fact declare bankruptcy before because he's really stupid at managing his money and makes really dumb decisions with it. But it wasn't because some tragedy happened, all right? The guy just made dumb decisions over and over. As much as I love Mike Tyson as like a person, I think he's hilarious. As the respect that I have for his career, Mike Tyson in his prime, I still every now and again like watching some of his fights. They're amazing. There's nothing like it. But I don't feel bad or sorry at all for him. He put himself in that situation. He decided to step on the ring. That's on him, dude. And I knew he was going to get his ass kicked. There's like no question. The dude was using a cane not that long ago. On Jake Paul's end, I have no idea why he would have done that. I don't think it was a lose-lose situation for the guy. I don't get why he chose to do it. Like, if you lose, great. You lost to a guy that's 58 years old. That's like double your age, so it looks awful. If you win, it also looks awful because, great, you beat up an old man. There's no glory there, right? So I don't get why he chose to do that either. Probably just the prize money, the marketing, all eyes on him. All publicity, good or bad, is good publicity, as a lot of people say, right? So probably that, and there's not much more to say here. I guess the last thing that's worth saying is that Netflix found out that it's not very easy to keep a stream going, I guess. If you try to tune into that fight live and watch it as it was happening, Netflix was constantly crashing, loading. You couldn't properly watch the fight. It was a complete shit show. And I get it if it was some amateur company that's doing this for the first time, but it's Netflix. Come on guys, figure it out. On other news that I had mentioned already, World War III, I'm not going to go over that again. We already kind of briefly mentioned it. Aliens coming out of the water. So this is an interesting one. I think that the main thing that's worth mentioning here, which kind of contradicts what I said at the beginning of the podcast, but that's what everybody's saying, is that no, the government hasn't actually confirmed that there are aliens in the water. There was an open discussion between lawmakers and witnesses, right? And there are several famous cases like, Commander Fravor, the Tic Tac. We could get into all that, but I don't think it's worth it. But specifically when it comes to the aliens in the water and the government having confirmed that wasn't quite what happened. The government hasn't really said that that's the case. Now, in my humble opinion, there is some compelling evidence that there is definitely something going on, and oftentimes it does come in and out of the water, using again the Tic Tac Commander Fravor as an example. There are multiple cases that are extremely credible, and we have proof of them, right? It was on radars, on recordings, whatever it was, and they're interesting to say the least. And in a lot of these cases, the UFOs are coming in and out of the water, right? And that has been something now that we're hearing more of, right? With now this discussion between lawmakers and witnesses. It's coming up again and again that the aliens are not actually coming from outer space, they're here. I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot more on this. I think that, it's worth mentioning that there is an open discussion going on about this, right? And the government has talked about and admitted regarding UFOs in the past. Specifically when it comes to the water UFOs, I guess, that hasn't been confirmed quite yet, but it is interesting. I don't know how I personally feel about that. I think that my opinion is kind of irrelevant. My tendency is to want it to be true, right? So I'm biased because I love this subject, so I want it to be true. I think that the whole topic of UFOs and ancient civilizations, like ancient aliens type of stuff that helped build our civilization and changed our genes, all of that to me is very entertaining. But that's all that it really is. Don't get me wrong, I've heavily looked into this, and I could do a 5-hour podcast just talking about this if you let me. I could, trust me, I'm into it. But as far as evidence, if it's a legitimate historic or scientific discussion to be had, I don't think it is. If anything, it's mostly entertainment, to me at least, so my opinion doesn't really matter. So next here on the list, I'll just mention this very quickly because I don't want to give this fucking clown any attention more than he really deserves, but Johnny Somali. I think that pretty much everybody knows who Johnny Somali is at this point. I don't think I have to explain to you the lore, but I guess I'll just briefly mention just in case. If you're a normal person that works and you're not terminally online, you might not know who Johnny Somali is, I guess. So Johnny Somali is this idiot streamer that goes to different countries, especially Asian countries. He went, I think, to Japan, he went to now South Korea, and he just makes a fool out of himself. He goes around yelling at people different profanities, disrespecting their culture, different statues that I won't get into because that's really fucked up what he did in South Korea particularly. But he's just a menace, right? He goes to these places, fucks around with everybody, and he knows that particularly in these countries that he's going to, people are very non-confrontational. They are very orderly in nature, they're not going to beat you up for no reason, and in general, they're very tolerant and nice people. So he's taking advantage of that and kind of making a mockery out of them, which is go fuck yourself, dude. it just makes everybody else look bad. Like, these are such cool countries. Like, South Korea and Japan are top of my list of places that I would love to visit one day. It would suck if, like, there's just this perception that Americans are assholes. Which I get that to an extent, a lot of people in countries already feel that way about Americans, but it's making it worse, right? It's hurting tourism. It makes it so when, normal people go there, they get disrespected or they're not allowed to go into certain places because they're tourists. It just makes everything worse for everybody, and it screws our international image. It's just, plus, man, it's just common decency. Don't be a dickhead. So it seems like justice might be getting served soon. Not only did he get beat up multiple times in different places that he has gone, the last one was South Korea. He did get his ass kicked there too. But now he's looking at some jail time possibly. I don't know at what stage they are of that trial. I think it's still ongoing. He hasn't been sentenced just yet. And I don't know how many years of jail or prison he's looking at, right? I've heard 7 years. I've heard 7 years, I've heard 20 years, I've heard 30 years. I've heard just about every number out there. So I don't think anybody really knows, but it does look like he might be going to jail. And I really, really, really fucking hope he does. I think that, listen, there are mistakes that people make that it's okay not to go to jail. Like, if it's a one-time thing, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe you did in fact disrespect someone's culture, but you didn't mean to, or it was a one-time thing. You were trying to be funny and you weren't. Like, listen, if it was a one-time thing, I am a person that is very hesitant to say throw somebody in jail, all right? A lot of people, I think, talk about this subject very casually, right? Oh, send them in jail. Oh, this person should be in jail. Or they like making fun of what happens to people when they go to jail. I don't think it's funny at all. Going to jail takes away years out of your life, all right? It actually probably shortens your life expectancy because of the diet, the amount of stress that you're in there, not getting enough sunlight and all that, right? It's not a good place to be. Also, I don't think that it helps most people, right? It's not like it's easy to reintegrate to society after you've been in jail, which is a separate conversation. And finally, the worst of all is people get very seriously abused in different ways that we don't need to get into in jail, right? So that's something that it shouldn't be taken lightly. I don't think that everybody should just be in jail for any reason. I'm not pro-criminal or anti-police or anything like that. I do think, obviously, some people do deserve to be in jail. That's not what I'm saying, but I do think that the US has an insane prison population. The United States in specific is, I think, 1 out of 2 countries that actually has private prisons. So we have an active incentive to send people to jail. That's a huge problem, right? Because you're creating a machine that profits based off of taking people's liberty away. And I could go on a whole rant about this, but it's a fucking problem. Now, granted, we're talking about South Korea. He's not going to jail here in the US, right? But I'm just saying, in general, I don't really like the idea of jail, right? I think that in general, jail should be something that is reserved for extreme cases only, right? I don't think that if you smoke some weed, you should be in jail type of thing, right? So there are very specific types of people that should be in jail, and that's it. With that said, I do see why they're wanting to throw him in jail. In my personal desire, it is that he does go to jail, because if this was a one-time thing, fine. If he had done something stupid trying to be funny 1 time, fine, or 2 times, it wouldn't be fine already, but okay, but it's not the first or the second time. This guy takes pride in always being able to get out of these situations. He takes pride in being able to disrespect and do the most amount of damage that he can and still not get in trouble. That's his whole thing. And I really think that there's a point where there's a repeated pattern of behavior where you should go to jail. And I'll give you an example that seems silly and kind of off the wall, but I lived in California back in the day, okay? And during the time that I lived in California, I had to evacuate my house 3 times because of fires, okay? California is constantly on fire. It's fucking crazy. I remember this one day, I lived in this, apartment complex where a lot of college students live, and I was playing League of Legends, I'm blasting music, and I can hear all these people screaming. And I'm just thinking, oh man, that's one hell of a party. So when the League game finishes, I start hearing like people hitting each other's door, and it's getting crazier. I'm like, dude, is there a riot going on outside? What the fuck is going on? So I go outside and I open my door, and the first thing I see is the hill where all these mansions are, like right in front of my complex above the hills. They're all on fire. All these palm trees, everything's on fucking fire. So I throw my dogs in the car, the lizard, my air fryer, my computer, my passport, my fucking IDs, anything. I'm starting to decide like what is okay to get lost in the fire and what isn't. It's an awful feeling if you've ever been through that. You're just hoping and praying that like some of the stuff that you couldn't take with you in time to evacuate, you don't lose forever, right? It's very sad. Thankfully, what ended up happening is the fire didn't go towards my complex. The way that the wind blew, it went towards the ocean, and just, people's mansions and houses got burnt, but none of my stuff got destroyed. Thankfully, it's still sad for those people, but I'm just saying. Come to find out that the absolute waste of space, human piece of trash that caused this was an arson, so that means it was a guy that started the fire and had done this another 8 times. So this loser that started this fire had gone to jail already 8 different fucking times for the same reason, for starting fucking fires. And he kept getting let go because nobody got hurt. It was just like property damage in the end, and nobody actually died. So at least in California, you don't go to jail for very long if nobody gets hurt. And then he would just get released and do it again. So there are people, in my opinion, that if you fucking do the same shit over and over, you should be in jail, like forever. And this is one of these cases where I don't think that he should be in jail forever, but I do think a minimum of like 5 years just to really learn your fucking lesson. Not only disrespecting random people on the bus, like on the subway and on the street, but in businesses and whatnot, but disrespecting memorials of people that got abused. And it's just like, man, how fucking, anyway. Let's move on from this. This topic just kind of pisses me off in general. Don't want to talk about it anymore, but that's what's going on. Hopefully he sees some jail time because it is a repeated offense in multiple countries, and I think he just should go to jail. Anyway, I'll leave that conversation right there. These are the topics that caught my eye this week and I've been interested on, and I'll end it right here and wish you a great weekend. Thanks for listening.